Mhm.
So it's really just important to be honest and don't be prideful. Let's get it all out there and see what it is. And oftentimes people are really astounded. I know I am every time I look at it. I'm just like, really?
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Deborah Bowers is a seasoned marketing professional with extensive experience in various advertising and marketing strategies. She specializes in creative strategy, focusing on developing campaigns that drive business success, as well as offering sales and mindset coaching. Deborah is passionate about helping women build emotional strength and confidence. Her personal journey of spiritual healing has significantly contributed to her success. She now co-hosts a podcast that's called Deals with Heels, where female entrepreneurs thrive. She covers topics related to personal and business growth through marketing tips, sales strategy, and the correct mindset. Listen to today's episode to learn valuable insights on how to set effective sales goals, develop correct strategies to grow your business, while also building emotional resilience and confidence. So, Deborah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad to have you today on the show. And I would love to first just start out before I get into like topic questions, like to hear your personal journey because it seems to have played a role in your success. So how do you combine your professional experience with your passion for helping women build emotional strength and confidence?
You know, my journey really started, of course, a long time ago for like everybody. I just turned 58 and I started out in sales and in marketing and climbing the corporate ladder and running marketing departments for big companies and sales departments. Sales was typically under the marketing department. And I was responsible not just for the plan that we were going to execute, but for the growth that went along with it. And so having that in very competitive industries, and that really gave me the knowledge and really trained me towards, I'm a marketing person that is so focused on sales. I'm not a content creator that's going to just create a bunch of video, and I'm really focused on that. And that really went all the way back to my roots. Then I raised 5 children, and you can't both work 60 hours a week and raise 5 kids successfully unless you just don't care if they graduate high school or become criminals and so I sacrificed a lot to do that. I really put my dreams on hold, and honestly, I lost myself in that process. Then, 2020 comes around and my kids were grown. I was taking care of my mom. I had been helping her. She was diagnosed with stage 3B lung cancer in May of 2017. And she lived 5 years and didn't die of cancer, which is a great story in and of itself. But my marriage fell apart. My nest was empty. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I got back into marketing. And then my mother died. And it was really the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. She was my person. I'm not easily vulnerable with others. And she lived with me part of the time. We were very close. And it's not like it was a shock necessarily, but I definitely wasn't ready. And I lost a significant amount of weight. I'm pretty athletic and thin anyway, but I was frail. I've gained 20 pounds since then. And I found myself just a shell, a ghost of who I was. I didn't feel like myself. I would pick up food on the way home and sit on my bed and eat it and watch TV. And I thought to myself, here I am. I have nothing. I'm starting over with nothing. My ex gambled our savings away. And so it was pretty rough, right? And that was the catalyst for me to change my life, to change my mindset, to change how I looked at things. And the first thing I changed was physical. I It was physical, but it was also mental, right? Because I said I can't accomplish what I want to accomplish for the rest of my life and be frail and feel like this. And I had no emotional regulation. I was in deep grief. And so I started counseling. But the first thing I did was, one, I'm not going to eat fast food. I'm not going to pick up food on the way home. I learned how to cook when I had stand on a chair to reach the stove. It was Gen X. They let us do anything. And I love to cook. It's very relaxing. And so that was a big step for me. And since that time, I've eaten fast food less than 5 times. It was a non-negotiable boundary. And in my mindset coaching, that is one of the first things we talk about, is making healthy choices. So just start with one healthy choice. I'm not going to eat fast food, and I'm not going to eat in my bedroom. That itself, getting used to that until it built up. And I went on my journey through counseling and started my marketing agency, Hexagon Media, in 2022. And then in 23, I started my podcast. And I have to say, I am more in my own skin today than I have been in a couple of decades. And I feel fantastic about it. I am on the path that I'm supposed to be on. And I sacrificed a lot to get here. So I'm kind of a late bloomer, I think. I think that kind of happens to a lot of women. I don't regret any of it at all, even the things that I'm not proud of. And they are definitely in there, because they brought me to here, to the here and now where I sit. And I like it here. And if I wouldn't have had the pain, or if I wouldn't have made the mistakes, I might not be here. I might be somewhere else. And so I have let go of all of that regret and charged forward with sales and marketing, which is my love and my passion, and helping other women find their voice, and helping female entrepreneurs along the way, all entrepreneurs along the way. I work with all genders of business people, but on my podcast, it really is delivered from a female perspective. And I'm passionate about helping women find their voice again after they've lost it.
That's important. Well, I know today we're going to talk about, the sales and forecasting and cash flow and those, type of topics that are really important to anyone in business as well. But I would love for you just to talk about maybe your analyzing like the sales. How do we set those goals as entrepreneurs so that we can effectively achieve those goals? We don't set them too low, but we don't set them so high too that they're unachievable, and then we feel like failures.
I like to start with somebody's actual budget. How much money do you need to make to pay all your bills, including your salary? And once we have that, like really, not what you want to budget. Yes, I want to spend this money and I want, not that. What do you absolutely have to make and pay yourself and all your employees? What do you absolutely have to have? And oftentimes when I'm doing sales coaching and helping a business owner find their sales culture and help them figure it out, when you break it down into those small bits. So now we know how much you have to have every month. Now let's talk about how much does it cost for you to either make your products and services, all of those things. And okay, so here's how much do you charge, and really get down to that basic math, right? This is how much it costs me to make my product that I sell, or my service, or whatever that is. And this is how much I sell it for. So this is my net profit. How much of that, based on cost of goods sold, of course. Now, how much do you have to sell to pay for that budget? How many items? How many things do you need to sell so that you pay for your product and your operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
And once we have that number, now we start talking about, okay, how many people do you have to talk to for you to sell one? How many people do you have to talk to for you to sell one?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, so most small business owners, once they get in front of somebody, they close at least half the time. That's some people are way more than that. Some people go all the way up to 80%. And there are people that are a little bit less, but a business owner is typically pretty passionate about what they're doing. They've definitely drank the Kool-Aid, and so normally about half. So when you break it down, sometimes I met with someone and they literally had to meet with 4 people a week to meet that basic goal. Mm-hmm. So now we know how many people you have to contact every week and talk to in order to get those sales that you need to just pay the bills. But we all want to do more than pay the bills, but we know what that is. Now we can set, and where are you currently? Where's your business currently on this level? Are you making that and you want to be more? Or are you struggling through here? And now we can set more realistic goals. So what are you going to do to generate twice as many leads and sell twice as much? How are we going to make those leads happen? Are you going to be out prospecting and networking and cold calling, which is always a certain amount of that is good and inexpensive to do, much less expensive than advertising? Are you going to do some email campaigns? Are you going to do some advertising? Are you going to make videos? What's your plan for doubling the amount of leads that you talk to every week? Or raising it by 25%? It really depends on the industry, but I break it down in those small bits. And when you look at it, I mean, if you look at just revenue and, oh my God, it's so daunting. How are we ever going to hit that goal? But when you break it down into what do you really need? How many do you really need? Now you're breaking it down and somebody's like, I only need to talk to 4 people? Really? And now it's so attainable. It really helps to simplify. And then you're not looking at this big giant forest goal. You're like, I only need to get these trees every week in order to get to that point. I find people, that makes it easier.
Right. Well, I think even when you were talking, I was thinking that a lot of times when people are looking at, those costs that they have to figure into, their cost of goods or things like that too, they often forget the overhead, or maybe they include some of the things, but they don't remember to include everything. So do you want to just touch on how they could figure out really what they're going to owe overall for everything included, so they don't underestimate that number of how many contacts and, how to get that profit figured out?
That really just comes down to that budget. And if they don't have one, I will sit down. Let's get your bank statement out. What are you really spending? What do you spend every day? What's your rent? I mean, I'll go through all of it. And oftentimes on their budget, when they just look at their budget, it's got stuff on there they're not doing more so. And then it doesn't have things that they really are spending. It doesn't have any gas or fuel sometimes. That's a big expense that you don't realize. So of course, hopefully you have a good bookkeeper that's going to be able to help and point out that. But if you don't, I with my client, we'll sit down and we'll go through it. But you need to know how much you're spending. I sit down with one person and their budget was good, but they obviously weren't covering everything. So there were things that were missing, and they were stopping at a Quick Trip or an OnQ or a Buc-ee's or whatever it was for where they were, and every day. And if you spend $7 to $10 a day on drinks and snacks at a convenience store, that is a huge expense that you don't realize because it's small little increments every day. But those can really add up. And then if you have workers with you, so I work with tradespeople a lot of times, and so their whole crew will go there and fuel up. And so then part of the time he buys snacks for them too. And so really just breaking that down, writing it all down and include everything. Sometimes we'll say, oh, that's personal. That's covered in your salary that we're going to add in. But most of the time, it's just being honest with yourself about not the way you want to be. Where are you? We can't solve your sales projections and help you meet those sales goals if we're not honest about what our real bills are. And what we're spending. I might say, hey, that's a lot to spend on drinks. You might consider not doing it, but I'm sure that's not what my job is, to help you sort your budget out. Right. I'm going to help you figure out how many sales we need and how to get those sales to cover all of it. So it's just important to be honest and don't be prideful. Let's get it all out there and see what it is. And oftentimes people are really astounded. I know I am. Every time I look at it, I'm just like, really? Right. I don't ever stop at convenience stores for snacks unless I have a headache, and then I'll stop and get caffeine. But that's just not something that I do. I eliminated that. But that's your more expertise on budgeting. But for me, leaving it at, you just have to be honest about it, and you have to take the time to sit down and look at your bank statement, because you don't remember every time you use your debit card. You don't remember that you have to stop at the supply store. You know what you're ordering, but you don't take into account that you got to go pick up stuff that they left out or didn't get enough of, and all the little trips. Sometimes those get left out because you're not calculating that. You're doing your stuff off of your invoicing or what you paid and off your orders instead. So really looking at that and being honest is the most important thing. So nothing gets left out.
Well, and earlier too, when you were talking about figuring out like how much you need to sell, to meet those goals, someone might be listening and saying, well, I'm confused because like I sell a lot of different products at very different prices, so how do I determine really how much I really need to sell of things? Because I might sell something for $50 and another thing might sell for $100, and I might sell like 300 of these, but only 50 of these. Like, I'm really confused. Like, what would you say to them?
We're going to look at what your historical revenue is and how much your outflow for those products are. So if you're wholesaling products and I'm buying them from somebody else, we know how much you paid for all of it. And we know how much you sold all of it for. And ultimately, it is important to look at every one of them. You don't want anything in there that's not making money unless it's drawing people to your site as a lead magnet, and that's making them buy more stuff. But really looking at all of those, I would look at some of them individually for that reason. But from identifying how many sales you need to make, if you've got a lot of products, we're going to look at percentages because you can't so we're going to look at your historical cost of goods sold. So how much did you pay for everything really for your inventory? How much was that? And if you're making it, how much did you spend making all of it? And then look at individually what's selling the most. Sometimes I really like to look at, what are you selling the most of? Which do you make the most money on? Who are your favorite?
Which could be two different things, right?
Yeah, they almost always are. They almost always are two different things. Even if you're making products and services, or you're a service provider in some way, and like you have clients you love to work with, they're probably not the ones you make the most money on. So when somebody will say, well, let's identify your target audience, who are your best customers? Oh boy, that's not very specific, is it? It really needs to be, because your best customer may be the one that you enjoy the most. My best customer might be the one that I have the biggest profit margin on. Somebody else might be the one that they sell the most of because they like racking up those numbers. So those kinds of descriptions of your customers, to me, I find not helpful when you're looking at the raw numbers, because what do we really want to know? We want to know that I make the most money on this product or this service, and I need to sell more of those because it's the least amount of effort. yeah, they're not my favorite. And so I got to force myself. I have to make a conscious, intentional effort to go after that specific target, because boy, do they help me. And they allow me to spend more time with this customer who I love helping, and I love spending time with them, and they just can't pay me very much. And so it allows me the freedom to be with the customers that I do like. So I think it's important to identify who those are. And if you have something that you're selling a lot of that doesn't have a lot of profit margin, how can we use that to get them into your sales funnel on your website and sell them more products? And you can get really deep into that market research and see if they buy this product, do they buy that alone, or do they buy it with other things? And which things do they like the most? You can get really into all of those individual details, and it's important for marketing and for making decisions on what products and services you're going to offer moving forward, and being intentional about the ones that make you a lot of money that might not be your favorite, but they're important. And how are we going to, because you naturally are going to target and talk to the people you like the most. How am I going to add in Mr. Grumpy Gruff that pays me a lot more money, but that he's grumpy gruff? I don't want to talk to him. Those are important too. But for projecting how many sales you're going to need, if you have a lot of products, you're going to look at the products themselves as a cumulative total. What do you pay for that inventory and producing that inventory with your shipping and all of those things? And then your operating budget, your marketing budget. What did it cost you to run your company to make all of those and to do all of those things? And you just have to look at it as a more of a whole for those projections. And if they're off and you're like, oh, we're just really working so hard for such a small amount of money, now those detailed looks at the products and services, and sometimes your pricing's off. Right? Maybe sometimes you should be charging more for that service, and you're in that low cost provider. People get in that rut because you'll get beat by a low cost provider consistently. And you can't outprice a low cost provider. That is a specific business plan and a specific way of doing things, and you have to make it up with volume. So I always recommend, everybody goes up against a low cost provider, and it's irritating. And if you're competitive, and you probably are, if you own your own business, then you are sick of losing business to them. And my advice is always step over those dimes and pick up dollars. Don't waste time on them. Don't devalue your product, but you also don't have to bash that company. I prefer to say, yeah, we looked at offering services for that low of a price, and for us, it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit into, I like to spend time with my clients, and I like to provide a certain service level. And at that price, I'm not able to do that. They do a great job for what they do. So I understand if that's where you need to go. This is why we can't do that for you. Now you're back having that conversation about yourself, and you're not talking about them and how they do it and bad mouthing, because they are a crucial part of the market. So don't spend a lot of time fighting for that business. In my experience, the more I tried to force something, the more I tried to change and fit it in so I could get that client, because I didn't want to let go, the worst of a client that was. It was like God told me, I tried to tell you not to take that client, but you would not listen. And so that's a big kind of trap to get in. And if you've been doing that, that'll become pretty obvious that you're putting a lot of time in for not as much revenue. And that's a big part of branding. How does your brand and your company fit within the competitive market in your industry? Are you middle of the road? Are you at the top? Are you the low cost provider? And once you identify that, that helps fill in the blanks for everything else. If you're the low cost provider, you got to add volume. You got to advertise to get that volume, and you got to go through them quickly so that you can turn them over and faster. That is a specific type of business marketing And the people that do it well in the sense that they make money doing it.
Right.
I don't think they offer, I prefer kind of a middle of the road, not the most expensive, but not the cheapest either. But I think a lot of people land in that area, but that is a great way to deal with that low cost provider and to identify if you're in that, then that affects how you project your sales and how much you need.
Right. Well, and I was going to ask that too, because we were talking before about taking the budget, finding out what your minimum is that you need to make and how many sales you need to do to get that. But someone might be thinking, well, I want to project, my future sales, and I don't want to just hit that minimum, but I'm not sure how to determine what that number really looks like for the future sales and my revenue. So can you talk about that financial forecasting part of it and how they can, take this step to figure out what that future number could be?
When you're looking at those projections, you have to not only look at what do we need to do to sell more, how much can we sell to get to that point, but what do you have to spend to get there too? Right. So if you're already, your salespeople are working, they can't physically sell anymore. They're pretty maxed out. Now and your price is right. We're not raising price either. We're staying kind of within that area. So you're going to have to hire more people to sell more. And so you have to factor in how that affects not just your marketing budget, not am I going to have to advertise to get it? Those are all things you have to consider. How am I going to get those leads? But also, what do I have to do operationally to make that happen? And those are really critical. Sometimes people are like, ooh, I'm not quite ready for that yet. So now we look at, all right, so we're not going to try to jump in and double our business in the first 6 months because operationally that's going to be too much. So let's do it. And I think looking at how much you've grown in the past, how much is that industry growing? If you're in some super hot industry that is in its exponential growth rate, then that's different than I'm in an entrenched industry and I'm fighting for market share. And what's a realistic number that you think you can do? And when you're talking to a business owner and you're asking him that question, it's important to be realistic about it. How much more could you sell? How many more could you close if we worked on closing skills? So let's say you're at 45%. I close 45% of the people that I talk to. How do we get that up to 60? Sometimes you can increase that revenue and meet those goals by just increasing your closing rate. And that is a skill. I one time met with a gentleman and they did very well. His business, he and his dad had like a sprinkler systems and all the yard watering and all the automated stuff. And he was talking to me about getting beat by, like, I'll go give a presentation and then somebody will come in and give another presentation and they'll beat my price by $100 and they just go with them. And so I had him go through his whole presentation and he ended and he never one time asked for the business. I'm like, you're doing so fantastic, never once asking for the sale. I said, somebody's coming in after you and saying, what do I need to do to be the one that you choose? How do I get your business right now? And they give, well, you can beat this guy's price. And so they did. So you have to be able to come in and close that and ask for that. So going through and really figuring out through that sales process will help determine if you can close more or not. And how sometimes that can get kind of complicated with pricing, but generally it's mindset, right? Sales is all in your brain. You can't let it get to you. You get your mindset right and have that culture top down through your company, and then you can really see growth in it. So looking at industry averages, looking how your business has performed historically. And if you're brand new, then those increases aren't going to be normal, right? Because everything's an increase. You're going to increase lots and lots. So that what stage of business are you in? It is important too, because at the beginning stages, you're going to have high growth percentages because there's nowhere to go but up.
Right. Exactly.
So really it can be tricky, but being realistic in those percentages, and if you are too if you get too assertive and aggressive with your growth numbers, you're just going to cause yourself a lot of stress.
Mhm.
And so being realistic about it, but honest about it too. I need it to be here. So let's figure out, how do I get it here?
Mhm.
That's really important, rather than just coming up with a number and making that projection and then figuring out how much money and operationally what you have to do. I work it that opposite way. How much can we change operationally and add it in? What's that realistic? Can we do 10% growth a year? Is that good in the plumbing industry, or is that good in the marketing industry or retail? What kind of that is happening? And then you can have some real wild card things like Trump's tariffs coming. That'd be terrifying if I were a drop shipper and every ounce of my merchandise came from overseas, and a lot of it does. Almost 80% of our clothing purchases in the United States are made overseas. So, that puts a whole kind of odd wrench in it too. But for the most part, it's industry standards and historically how you're doing, and how flexible can you be operationally? How set are you operationally so that you can move forward? I see a lot of businesses that go out of business because they grew very quickly operationally. They bought trucks, they bought equipment, they bought cranes, they bought all of the things. And they really overstretched themselves on that operational budget. And now they don't have the budget to generate the leads and the sales necessary to support it. They leave that portion of it out, and they get stuck. I can't even count the number of businesses I've seen go out of business for that reason, not having the foresight of, you have to spend money on marketing to generate the sales to keep that truck busy.
Right.
And
exactly.
So you got to consider all of those factors too. And having a great bookkeeper or CPA to help you look at that, they see patterns that the rest of us don't see. And they typically have a better idea of, ooh, that's a pretty big percentage of your operating budget that's going towards equipment costs and insurance and all of the things that you weren't prepared for. Having that professional is going to be really important to help line all of that out, because a lot of sales coaches and marketing people like me don't have that piece of it. So it's important if they don't. I'm not going to have a good handle on every industry because I don't work in every industry. So I'm definitely want that piece of it to come over to help better understand how the operational sides of it work, and that in specific industries.
Perfect. Well, this has been an informative topic. I know we're at the end of the time that we have together for today. So I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners. And if they're interested in finding out more from you, how can they contact you?
I have a free ebook that they can download. It is short, but it is titled 5 Steps to a Mindset for Success. They're the actual 5 steps I took. I'm not a psychologist. It's actually what I did personally to change my life and find myself and my purpose again. Mindset is everything. And it certainly is with being an entrepreneur and in sales. You got to be tough. You got to have that right mindset. You can't let things get you down. You got to pivot and move forward and learn. And so mindset is really important. So I have that book for free right now. You can download it on my website, hexagonmedia.net. And you can always contact me through my podcast, dealswithheels.com. And email Deborah@dealswithheels.com. I'm always happy to talk to people about sales. I absolutely love sales and marketing. There's a lot of reasons businesses go out of business, and you can't predict exactly what would cause, and you've got a whole laundry list of them. But I can guarantee that if you don't sell your products and services, you're for sure going to go out of business.
Mhm.
So paying attention to that sales is really important, and mindset's really important as well. I love talking about it with people and helping them.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Deborah, for being a guest on my show and sharing your insights on this topic. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I had such a good time. It goes so fast, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And to the listener, I hope you enjoyed today's topic. And as a reminder, if you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.